On November 2, 2015, Amy Velarde walked into her family's three-bedroom home in Pendleton, South Carolina, only to be met with a horrific scene. Blood was everywhere. Her mother, Kathy Taylor Scott, 60, her grandmother, Violet Taylor, 82, her stepfather, Mike Scott, 58, and his mother, Barbara Scott, 80, had all been brutally murdered. The sheer violence of the crime was staggering, especially since nothing of value appeared to have been taken and there were no signs of forced entry. It looked like whoever committed the murders had been let inside, perhaps even by someone they trusted. Mike and Kathy had been living in a trailer in Columbia with their two elderly mothers. Their love story began in junior high, faded over time, and was reignited years later when they crossed paths again. They were seen by many as a generous, kind-hearted couple who devoted themselves to their family and the people around them. Kathy was known for her energetic personality and love for the outdoors. Violet Taylor, Kathy's mother, deeply trusted her daughter, especially after her husband's death, leaving her in charge of her finances and property. Barbara Scott, Mike's mother, was active in her local church and spent her time caring for children in the nursery. Violet and Barbara formed a close bond and spent their later years peacefully living under the same roof. Amy, Kathy's daughter, lived in a single-wide trailer just 50 yards away with her fiancé Ross Velarde and her two children. Although Amy was the children's mother, it was Mike and Kathy who played the more active parenting role, handling clothing, medical appointments, and school events. They were devoted grandparents and deeply involved in the children's lives. Amy had gone through several marriages before getting involved with Ross at 28. Ross was a former Marine with elite training in embassy security and a record of military honors, despite being described as charming. Tensions in the family had begun to grow. On July 4, 2015, Mike and Kathy took Amy's children to a church event. When they returned, they found Amy and Ross drinking and partying with friends. An argument broke out when Mike and Kathy tried to take the children with them. Amy insisted they were her children and refused to let the grandparents have access to them anymore. This moment marked the beginning of a deep family rift. Social media soon became a battleground. Amy and Ross frequently posted on Facebook, and their online activity provided key insights into the fractured family dynamic. Amy's posts became increasingly hostile. On July 9, she accused Mike and Kathy without naming them of lying. The following day, Mike's sister privately messaged Amy, asking her to stop airing personal grievances online for the children's sake. Amy refused, declaring that Mike would never again act as a grandfather to her kids. Despite Mike and Kathy attempting to reconcile and publicly wishing Amy well, the hostility persisted. Amy made claims of emotional abuse and uploaded videos of family arguments. A neighbor even reported hearing Amy yell that she wished her parents were dead. When Amy and Ross got married on October 24, Kathy wasn't invited. Just days later, Mike visited Amy's trailer to apologize, explaining that the estrangement was deeply hurting Kathy and Violet. Touched by the gesture, Amy resumed visits to her parents' home. She even assured them they could see the kids again the following weekend when they returned from Ross's parents' house. The weekend of the tragedy, Amy's children were away, staying with Ross's parents. When Amy hadn't heard from her family in a couple of days, she grew worried and went to check on them. The lights were off, but the TV was still on. She turned on the lights and discovered the unimaginable. At 12:30 p.m. on November 2, she called 911, begging officers to come to the home on Refuge Road. What police found inside was horrifying. The victims had been shot in the face multiple times and their throats were slit, indicating the killer had switched weapons mid-crime. The violent struggle left clear signs of chaos, yet there was no forced entry. Investigators believed the killer had been willingly led inside. In the main bedroom closet, a shelf was found tipped forward, suggesting something heavy had been removed. Authorities suspected that a safe containing cash had been stolen. It was no secret that Mike kept large amounts of cash at home. Amy was initially treated as a grieving family member. That perception changed when police found $67,000 in her trailer. The cash was organized by denomination, the exact way Mike had been known to store his money. Amy and Ross claimed it was savings and income from their dog grooming business, but the story didn't add up. Detectives also found a full bucket of Halloween candy near the front door and toys laid out in the living room, evidence the family had expected Amy's children to visit. It's now believed the murders took place on Halloween night, October 31st. For months, Amy and Ross lived just steps away in their trailer while her children were out of town. Yet it was clear the grandparents had been expecting a visit from the kids. Halloween decorations were still up, and toys were arranged in the living room. Each victim had defensive wounds on their hands, confirming they had fought fiercely against their attacker. Mike Scott was found face down in the living room, lying in a pool of blood. He had 6 deep lacerations on the left side of his neck, each caused by a long knife. He had also been shot behind the left ear. Nearby, the two elderly women, Violet Taylor and Barbara Scott, lay side by side. Violet was positioned on the outer side, nearly decapitated by a deep gash across her neck. She had also sustained 2 gunshot wounds to the head and defensive injuries on her left hand, a sign of her struggle. Barbara Scott had the most extensive injuries of all. approximately 6 stab wounds to her neck, chest and shoulder, along with a gunshot wound behind her right ear at close range. The brutality of the stabbings was especially disturbing considering the women's advanced age and frailty. Kathy Scott was discovered in the bedroom. She had been stabbed through the right lung, the blade slicing through a major blood vessel and causing massive internal bleeding. The wound was 9¼ inches deep and showed a rectangular bruise consistent with a combat knife equipped with a hilt. In addition to the stabbing, she had 2 gunshot wounds. Evidence suggested she had been reaching for a gun before collapsing over a backpack and pillow in the hallway. Bloody footprints indicated she was likely attacked in the hallway and fled to the bedroom, only to be shot there. The complexity and violence of the scene suggested that more than one assailant may have been involved. Different weapons had been used, and multiple sets of footprints were found. Adding to suspicion, a photo Mike Scott had sent to a friend on October 29th, just days before the murders, showed off a large stash of cash he kept in the house. That money later turned up in Amy and Ross's trailer, with serial numbers matching the cash from Mike's picture. Amy's behavior following the murders raised many red flags. At the funeral, while others grieved, she wore a striking red outfit and displayed a cold, detached demeanor. When Violet's niece approached to offer condolences, Amy met her with an emotionless declaration, "I did not do it." Immediately after the funeral, Amy cleared out the entire house, removing bloody carpets and anything that could serve as evidence. Despite all this, suspicion didn't officially fall on Amy and Ross until 2018. That year, Amy made a formal request to retrieve the items that had been collected as evidence: vehicles, firearms, and cash. Her bold move brought her back onto investigators' radar. The police began digging into the couple's finances and noticed glaring discrepancies. Ross had received a $25,000 disability settlement after being discharged from the Marines. In 2013, their dog grooming business, Styles for Miles, reportedly brought in $177,000, and they also received a $5,000 tax refund. However, their spending raised serious concerns. Ross purchased a $14,000 truck, a $5,800 Mustang, and 2 Harley-Davidsons totaling $15,500, bringing their known expenditures to $35,000, already exceeding the total amount of Ross's disability payout. Meanwhile, their business account had only $40 in 2015, and there were messages showing the couple struggling to pay rent. Records showed they had a $7,000 bill due on the 1st of the month. Adding to the mounting financial pressure, these findings, combined with Amy's erratic behavior and possession of the stolen cash, pointed investigators toward a darker truth beneath the family tragedy. In November 2015, just days after the brutal murders, Amy and Ross surprisingly had a large amount of cash despite their known financial struggles. Their business, Styles for Miles, had brought in only $2,700 in 2014 and roughly $27,000 in 2015, nowhere near enough to justify their lavish spending. Amy's cousin, Hannah Taylor, who had worked at the Pendleton-based grooming shop, confirmed that the couple was under significant financial strain. She recalled that her paychecks frequently came up short, and every morning she would check voicemails from relentless bill collectors. According to Hannah, they were calling and leaving voicemails like you would not believe. Hannah was fired just 1 or 2 months before the murders, shortly after she confronted the couple about unpaid wages. She also reported seeing a large military-style knife in Amy's vehicle, which immediately raised suspicions, as investigators believed that a combat knife had been used in the killings. Text messages recovered from the couple's phones painted an even darker picture of their financial desperation. On September 4, 2015, Ross messaged Amy, "Honey, please do not spend any more money. We only have $40 left in the business account." Then on October 15th, Amy messaged Ross to say that people were causing a scene at the shop over unpaid rent. Ross replied, "What would you like me to say to them, babe? I mean, at the moment we do not have the money." Another employee, Roxy Voorhees, told investigators that Amy was clearly the one in control of the relationship. She also revealed that Amy had long held deep resentment toward her mother, Kathy, stemming from a decision Kathy made years earlier to remove Amy's father from life support after he was crushed in a tragic car accident. Cell phone data showed that both Amy and Ross's phones pinged in the vicinity of their home on Halloween night, when the murders were believed to have taken place. Additionally, red AX shoes found in CCTV footage of Ross matched the shoe prints at the crime scene. That particular pair of shoes, along with the hoodie Ross was seen wearing in the footage, were never recovered despite claiming to have gone to bed around 9 p.m. The couple's messages and store activity contradicted that statement. Text messages placed them near the area around 8:36 p.m., and CCTV later showed them at a store past 9:38 p.m. when interviewed separately. Amy refused to cooperate, while Ross forgot the story they had originally told police that they had stayed in bed all night. The inconsistencies in their statements made it clear to investigators that the couple was lying. As detectives continued reviewing the financial records, phone data, the red shoe prints, and the couple's inconsistent Alibis. The evidence against them mounted, combined with the cash found in their trailer that matched money Mike Scott had shown off just days before his death, and their toxic relationship with the victims. Authorities felt confident they had enough to move forward. In December 2023, more than 8 years after the horrific events of Halloween 2015, Amy and Ross Velarde were arrested and charged with the murders. Their bond application was denied in February 2024. During the hearing, prosecutor Heather Weiss stated plainly, the one person who had the most to gain from the killings was Amy Velarde. Weiss pointed out how quickly Amy cleaned up the crime scene and moved her family into the house. Investigators still don't know exactly what Amy did with the inheritance money, but they are certain about one thing: her motive. For Pam Isabella, Mike Scott's sister, the arrests brought long-awaited relief. After years of grief and unanswered questions, she expressed gratitude for finally seeing justice after losing her brother and mother in such a devastating way. Amy and Ross, consumed by greed and hatred, allowed their thirst for control and money to destroy everything. They had a loving and supportive family that gave them a rent-free place to live, helped raise their children, and stood by them through life's challenges. But in the end, they lost it all: love, trust, family, and even the very money they so desperately wanted. If only they had chosen to live quietly and gratefully, their lives might have turned out just fine. For years, they almost got away with it, forgetting one timeless truth: the truth always comes out, just like the case of Kellyanne Workman when Kelly disappeared. Many suspected who was responsible, but no one had the courage to speak up. It would take 35 years before justice began to stir again. Born in 1965 to farmer Stanley and Joan Workman, Kelly grew up in the quiet, rural landscape of Seymour in Douglas County, Missouri. Her father worked at Deco Corporation for nearly 2 decades, but his true passion was farming and tending to his dairy herd. Kelly had 2 siblings, Pam and Mark, and a baby brother, Ames Matthew, who had tragically passed away in infancy. Kelly was a quiet, well-mannered young woman with blonde hair and green eyes. She lived at home and often helped people around the community with housework and yard maintenance. For 3 years, she took care of the Dogwood Cemetery's grounds, mowing the grass regularly even into the evenings. The cemetery never frightened her, but on one warm summer evening her world and her family's would change forever. On June 30th, 1989, Kelly was last seen around 5:40 p.m., diligently mowing the cemetery lawn near the Southern Baptist Church at the corner of Highway 14 and Z. Her uncle, passing by, saw her working, but by 6:15 p.m. she was gone. Her family initially thought she might just be running late, but as the hours ticked by with no word, worry turned into dread. Kelly's mother Joan rushed to her relative's home in a panic, setting off a flurry of emotion and activity. Friends and family quickly formed search parties, holding on to hope as the Douglas County community rallied together. Despite the massive search effort, there was no trace of Kelly. Her car was found at the cemetery with the keys still in the ignition. The mower was turned off, but fully gassed, and only 2/3 of the grass had been cut. Police believed she had been abruptly interrupted, perhaps kidnapped. Though it wasn't a robbery. At the time, Kelly's sister Pam was living in Kansas City, about 200 miles away. On the morning of July 1st, her aunt and uncle showed up at her apartment with devastating news: Kelly was missing. The drive back to Douglas County was filled with anguish. Each passing mile was heavy with fear and uncertainty. For a week, the Workman family prayed and searched, clinging to the hope that Kelly would return home safely. But that hope was crushed when her body was found in a creek in the Mark Twain National Forest, near Oldfield, more than 10 miles from where she was last seen. The discovery was especially traumatic for 2 of her uncles, who were present when her body was recovered. The rapid decomposition of the remains only added to the horror and the unanswered questions. Kellyanne Workman's disappearance left a lasting scar on her family and community. Her tragic story, like many others, became a haunting reminder that even in small, tight-knit towns, danger can strike close to home, and justice, though delayed, is never completely out of reach. Kellyanne Workman's body was found in such a decomposed state that authorities were unable to determine the exact cause of death. X-rays revealed no signs of gunshot wounds or head trauma. Investigators concluded she most likely lost her life on the night of June 30th or in the early hours of July 1st, 1989. Her sister, Pam, always felt Kelly's case hadn't received the urgency it deserved. That lack of attention only deepened her sorrow and frustration. Still, she clung to hope, believing that one day justice would come, not just for Kelly, but for every family enduring the torment of a cold case. Pam believed Kelly may have been targeted because she overheard something she shouldn't have while working at the Dogwood store, possibly something involving illegal activity or money. If that were true, it gave someone a motive to silence her. Despite Pam's belief that not enough was done, law enforcement faced their own roadblocks. They had 3 suspects early on, but no physical evidence to link any of them to the crime. Although all 3 were interrogated, each had alibis. On July 10, 1989, during a joint meeting between Christian and Douglas County Sheriff's Departments, Springfield and Willow Springs law enforcement, and the Missouri State Highway Patrol, Officials admitted they had no physical leads to pursue. Workman family continued to push for answers. They made public pleas for information, urging anyone with knowledge to come forward. On July 13, 1989, they increased the $10,000 reward originally offered when Kelly went missing, this time specifically for information that would lead to an arrest. Yet by October 20th, 4 months into the investigation, the Douglas County Sheriff admitted there had been no major developments. Investigators continued eliminating suspects and possibilities, but they still had nothing conclusive. Then, in late December of that year, there was a small breakthrough. On December 30th, Kelly's mother Joan was discussing the events of the day. Kelly vanished when a family friend shared something they had forgotten or withheld for days after Kelly went missing. Someone had called the friend's house and claimed they saw a man at the Workman residence the afternoon Kelly disappeared. Unfortunately, the caller didn't name the man, but it confirmed someone had seen something. The person hadn't come forward earlier because they were being threatened. Joan strongly believed that if the attacker had been a stranger, Kelly would have fought back. That suggested she likely knew her killer. Still, time passed, and the case grew colder. Authorities remained hopeful, occasionally reiterating their belief that someone, somewhere, held the missing piece of the puzzle. Suspicion in town centered around two well-known figures, Leonard Dwight Banks and Bobby Lee Banks, known as the Banks brothers. In August 1990, Bobby Lee took a polygraph test at the request of the Missouri State Highway Patrol and failed. His attorney claimed the results were due to emotional instability and advised him against making public comments. Meanwhile, Dwight Banks also underwent a polygraph test and was asked 3 direct questions. Did he kill Kellyanne Workman? Did he know who did? Was he under the influence of illegal substances at the time? Dwight answered no to all 3, and the examiner concluded he was telling the truth. Police also discovered that a young man had been seen at the cemetery on the day Kelly vanished. Later that same day, his truck was found burned. Investigators suspected he might have been involved, and that someone, perhaps an accomplice, had destroyed the vehicle and threatened him into silence. The case went quiet again until October 1992, when Joan Workman received a phone call from an elderly individual. The caller mentioned a woman and her boyfriend believed to be involved in Kelly's death. He was reportedly a drug dealer. Unfortunately, both individuals had solid alibis, and the identity of the caller was never verified. The lead turned into another dead-end dot at one point. Dwight Banks' ex-girlfriend came forward and revealed that Dwight had asked her to lie for him and serve as his alibi on the night Kelly was murdered. Despite this troubling claim, 6 years after Kelly's, the body had been found. There was still no significant breakthroughs. Christian County Sheriff Steve Whitney later reported that a grand jury investigation had also produced no results. Kelly's father, Stanley Workman, believed that multiple people had been involved in her abduction and death, but he had no way to prove it then. In mid-July 1995, a new lead surfaced. Sheriff Whitney confirmed that it had prompted renewed investigative efforts. Though he wouldn't reveal details, he expressed confidence in the direction of the case, stating he believed he knew who was responsible. Building a solid case in the decades-old murder of Kellyanne Workman remained a significant challenge for investigators. But by July 1996, a breakthrough seemed within reach. Bobby and Dwight Banks were officially identified as suspects. Dwight confessed that he and his brother had seen Kelly just hours before her disappearance while she was working at the dogwood store. Still, he insisted they had nothing to do with her abduction or murder, claiming that during the critical time, he and Bobby were at home eating fried chicken. Investigators, however, had reason to believe Dwight may have taken illegal substances, possibly a relaxant or Valium, to help him pass the polygraph test that his brother Bobby had failed. Despite these developments, progress stalled again. Then, on July 16, 1996, the case took a chilling turn. A bomb was discovered on the hood of Joan Workman's car at around 5:30 a.m. Officers from multiple counties, along with a bomb squad from Jefferson City, responded immediately. The bomb had threatening inscriptions, but when it was detonated, later that day, it was found to contain no explosive materials. It was a scare tactic, an attempt to intimidate the Workman family into silence or fear. Rita Sanders, a seasoned 17-year veteran of law enforcement, told the Workmans she believed she knew exactly who was responsible for Kelly's death: 2 men from Seymour and a third from rural Fordland. According to her, 2 of these suspects were seen near the crime scene shortly before Kelly vanished, and the third helped dispose of her body. Rita also shared that a witness had seen Kelly being forced into a pickup truck, fighting for her life. Despite her conviction, Rita was fired from the force later that year. She feared that mishandled evidence and the passage of time would prevent justice from ever being served. On December 1998, hope briefly reignited when a man from Ava confessed to being involved in Kelly's murder and implicated 2 others, yet again, no arrests followed. One of the men named in the confession was Waybeld, believed to be both a witness and accomplice. On June 9, 1999, DNA testing warrants were issued for Dwight Banks and Belt. However, the lab results were never made public, and neither man was charged. Belt later claimed he wasn't worried about the testing, saying he didn't even know the Banks brothers. He admitted to being at the dogwood store that day and seeing Kelly, but insisted that someone must have simply seen him there and misidentified his involvement. As time passed, the case faded into the background. Officers retired, key photographic, the evidence went missing, and leads dried up. In one unsettling encounter, Kelly's sister Pam ran into Dwight Banks while shopping for groceries. He attempted to provoke a confrontation, leaving her deeply shaken. Then, in 2021, the case was assigned to investigators Leslie Alber and Christopher Holland, who were working in the Department of Health and Senior Services Bureau of Special Investigations. Though their primary focus was elder and dependent adult abuse, they took on Kelly's cold case with determination. It wasn't until their second year on the case that they located and interviewed key eyewitnesses that proved critical. The information these witnesses provided helped solidify the connection between the Banks brothers, Waybelt, and Kelly's murder. Finally, in 2022, things began to move swiftly. Sadly, Kelly's father, Stanley Workman, passed away on September 11, 2022. Just before justice was finally served on February 20, 2024, a Douglas County grand jury indicted 65-year-old Bobby Banks of Seymour, 64-year-old Leonard Dwight Banks of Gainesville, and 64-year-old Waybelt of Ava. All three were charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and assault in connection with the 1989 slaying of Kelly Ann Workman. Each was booked into the Douglas County Jail on a $250,000 cash bond. At their arraignments, all three men pleaded not guilty. Defense attorneys sought leniency, citing Dwight Banks' severe health issues, including pancreatic cancer and diabetes. Nevertheless, the charges they face are first-degree felonies carrying the possibility of life in prison. After more than 3 decades of heartache and unanswered questions, Kelly Ann Workman's family is finally seeing long